Ada had always believed in fairy tales. Not the kind with castles, glass slippers, or dragons, but the kind born in Lagos traffic and whispered during midnight prayers. The kind where love was patient, partners were kind, and betrayal was a foreign language. So when she met Richard at a friend's corporate fundraiser in Victoria Island, it felt like God had finally answered her long-standing prayer. He was 34, broad-shouldered, confident without arrogance, and blessed with a smile that could quiet a room. His business, a fast-growing logistics firm, had recently expanded into Ghana and Kenya, and he was already featured on the covers of local business magazines. But it wasn't his wealth that caught her attention, it was his attention. He noticed when she shifted uncomfortably in heels. He remembered the way she liked her tea. He texted good morning and actually asked how her day went. These weren't the acts of a rich man looking for a fling. These were the signs of something real. And real it became. 3 months in, Richard asked her to move in with him. 6 months later, he proposed at a private dinner in a garden full of string lights and soft saxophone music. The ring sparkled, but the sincerity in his eyes outshone it. For Ada, it was more than a proposal. It was an affirmation that love stories could still happen, even in a world drowning in half-truths and heartache. But on one ordinary Thursday, everything changed. It was a quiet afternoon. The rain had started gently around 2 p.m., tapping on the window of their Lekki home like a polite visitor. Ada had taken the day off work. She was in the kitchen trying to replicate her mother's egusi soup, smiling at the thought of Richard's expression when he tasted it. He always praised her cooking, especially when it reminded him of simpler times. Richard had gone out for a meeting but returned earlier than usual, dropping his phone carelessly on the glass center table before heading into the bathroom for a shower. That was when it happened. The phone buzzed. Once, twice, then again. Curious, Ada leaned forward. She never made a habit of checking his messages. Richard had given her no reason to distrust him. But today, something in her chest shifted. She picked up the phone. A name flashed on the screen, Baby M. The message preview read, "Can't wait for tonight. I miss you already. Kiss mark." Her breath caught. The room blurred. Her fingers trembled as she unlocked the phone. She shouldn't. She knew she shouldn't. But some part of her, an instinct sharpened by stories from friends and quiet moments of doubt, urged her on. Inside the phone was a world she had never imagined. Dozens of messages, pictures, voice notes. Not from one woman. From 5. Each with pet names. Each with receipts of hotel bookings, flight tickets, money transfers. Dates that overlapped with their own trips. Stories she remembered, now unraveled as lies. Her heart pounded like war drums in her chest. She scrolled further. One woman had sent a video. Richard laughing on a beach. Not the beach from their proposal trip. Another beach. Another woman. Another life. Ada dropped the phone like it burned her. The shower was still running. She stood frozen in place, staring at the space where the man she loved, and thought she knew, had been only minutes ago. Her legs moved before her mind could catch up. She walked to the guest room, locked the door, and slid down to the floor. Tears didn't come immediately. What came first was shock. Then numbness. Then the betrayal. By the time Richard stepped out of the bathroom, towel wrapped around his waist, humming like a man without a care, Ada was standing in the living room. Phone in hand. Eyes red. Expression unreadable. He paused. "Ada? Is everything okay?" She said nothing. She walked up to him and handed him the phone. "I saw everything." For a moment, he didn't react. Then he sighed. Like a man caught in a meeting that had gone too long. "Ada, it's not what you think." That was the worst part. The calmness. The lack of panic. As if this was routine. As if cheating on a woman who trusted him with everything was just another line item in his schedule. She shook her head. "I gave you my heart, Richard. I gave you my life. And I gave you a future," he snapped, suddenly defensive. "I never said I was perfect. You had the ring, the house, the comfort. What else did you want?" Ada's voice cracked. "Loyalty." They stood in silence. The kind of silence that comes when a chapter ends and no one wants to admit it. "I can forgive," she whispered, "but I won't forget." He tried to step closer. She stepped back. "Don't. Just don't." Ada packed her things that same night. No tears. No dramatic slamming of doors. Just quiet dignity. She left the ring on the dining table, next to a small note that read, "I was raised to believe love was sacred. I now understand it should also be safe." As she stepped into the waiting taxi, she looked back only once. Not for him, but for herself. To remember the version of Ada who once believed in fairy tales. The weeks that followed were quiet. Ada moved back to her parents' home in Soyulir. She resigned from her job at the advertising firm and enrolled in a tech training program she had always been interested in but never pursued. At first, people whispered. Some friends kept their distance, afraid betrayal was contagious. But others showed up. Old classmates, Auntie Bisi from church, even strangers online. After she posted an anonymous blog entry titled, "I was almost a wife, but I found myself instead." Her blog grew. Thousands of women shared their own stories. And slowly, Ada realized her pain had a purpose. 3 months later, Ada received a call from a reporter. A major investigation was underway into Richard's logistics firm. Allegations of fraud, tax evasion, multiple lawsuits. His face was now in headlines, but not for the reasons it once had been. Ada said nothing. She posted no updates. She sought no revenge. She simply updated her blog with one new entry. "Truth is quiet, but it always walks you home." A year passed. Ada launched her own startup, an online hub for women in tech. She was invited to speak at conferences, to mentor girls from underserved communities, to share her story not just as a survivor, but as a builder. And one evening, while walking through a co-working space in Yaba, she saw a familiar face in the crowd. A man. Warm smile. Steady eyes. They didn't fall in love that day, but they talked, and laughed, and exchanged contacts. Because sometimes, the real fairy tale starts after the story you thought would define you ends. If Ada could speak to her younger self, she would say, "Love is not blind. It sees, and still stays, but never at the cost of your dignity." She would say, "Let heartbreak be your teacher, not your tomb." And finally, never fear walking away from someone who doesn't see your worth. Your future will thank you. The story of Richard's betrayal didn't end with Ada's departure. While Ada focused on rebuilding her life, Richard's world began to crumble. His company, once a symbol of entrepreneurial success, was exposed for questionable business practices. Anonymous tips to the press, possibly from disgruntled employees or former clients, revealed a long history of underhanded deals. Richard was summoned for questioning by anti-corruption agencies. He wore dark glasses to hide from the press, but the shame was impossible to mask. Business partners pulled out. Contracts were cancelled. His once loyal staff began to jump ship, whispering among themselves, "Karma has no deadline." Ada, upon hearing the news, remained silent. She refused interviews. She deleted social media. Not out of fear, but out of principle. The story wasn't about revenge. It was about closure. Still, her name was now tied to his legacy. Whenever people Googled Richard, Ada's name showed up. She was the woman who walked away when it mattered. Despite her strength, Ada wasn't immune to the sting of memory. Some nights, when the streetlights flickered outside her new flat in Soryulir, she would stare at the ceiling and remember the garden where he proposed. The laughter, the promises. She had given him everything. And in return, he gave her the lesson of a lifetime. It was during one of those quiet nights that Ada began journaling. At first, it was a way to vent. But soon, her words grew into something more structured. She began writing fictional short stories inspired by real events, of women who walked through fire and came out golden. Her stories weren't just for catharsis, they became a source of healing for others too. She titled the series, "When the Pain Spoke." Within months, publishers came calling. One Sunday afternoon, as Ada sipped Zobo in a cafe near the university, her phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. She answered, cautiously. "Ada, it's me, Richard." Her stomach tightened, but her voice remained calm. "Why are you calling me?" His voice was hoarse, heavy. "I owe you an apology. Not just for the cheating. For everything. For making you feel like you weren't enough when you were more than I deserved." She closed her eyes. "You don't owe me anything, Richard. I forgave you a long time ago. But I'll never forget." He hesitated. "I saw your TEDx talk. You're doing amazing work. Honestly, you inspire me." She smiled faintly. "Then let that inspiration take you somewhere good. Goodbye, Richard." She hung up, and this time, there was no pain, just peace. Ada's blog and writing transformed into a platform for advocacy. She began collaborating with NGOs focused on women's empowerment. She spoke at events across Africa, Accra, Nairobi, Johannesburg. Her voice became a beacon for young women trapped in toxic relationships, unsure if they could survive heartbreak. Her message was simple. You are allowed to leave. You are allowed to start again. You are allowed to choose yourself. Young girls sent her letters. Some addressed her as Auntie Ada. Others simply wrote, "Thank you for helping me leave." The healing spread. 2 years had passed. Ada was preparing for her first book tour when she received a letter in the mail. It was handwritten. The handwriting was familiar. It was from Baby M. The letter read, "Dear Ada, I was one of them. One of the women Richard lied to. But I never knew about you. Until it all came out. When he stopped calling, I thought I did something wrong. I didn't realize I was just one of many. Then I found your blog. And I cried. And then I healed. Thank you for your honesty. Thank you for your strength. You saved more than yourself. You saved me too." Ada folded the letter and placed it in a small wooden box she kept by her bed. Not all pain was wasted. In a quiet part of Abuja, Ada launched her nonprofit, the Mirror House Foundation. Its mission? To provide counseling, legal help, and job training for women leaving emotionally abusive relationships. It started small. 1 room, 1 counselor. But word spread. Women came from near and far, not for handouts, but for dignity. And every time Ada stood before them, she reminded them, "You are not what someone did to you. You are what you choose to become." 4 years after the day she left Richard, Ada met Tunde, a widower, a father of 1, soft-spoken, curious eyes, a builder of solar farms in rural communities. They met at a seminar on sustainable development. He asked her about her writing. She asked him about his daughter. They talked for 6 hours straight. He never tried to impress her. He simply saw her. And slowly, love returned. This time, not with promises of diamonds or luxury trips, but with laughter, consistency, and shared silence. And when he asked her to marry him, he did so with no crowd, no saxophone, no ring the size of her knuckle. Just a simple, sincere question. "Will you build life with me?" And she said yes. On their wedding day, Ada wore a dress her mother once wore. Simple, graceful. She walked down the aisle not to be saved, but to be celebrated. And as she exchanged vows with Tunde, she remembered the girl who once believed in fairy tales. She smiled, because that girl had grown into a woman who wrote her own. If you're inspired by stories of everyday people making a difference, be sure to check out another tale from our channel. Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you.